People tend to gravitate towards God in their times of need. When their backs are against the wall and there's nowhere else to turn, people remember that there's a God out who is supposed to have infinite abilities. What we seem to forget is that one of those abilities is the ability to love. Another is patience. God has power and might and authority, but He also has patience, love, and kindness. So sometimes we try to get to the might and power of God, but we forget the patience He has. He's patient enough to see you through that fire you're desperately trying to get away from. He's patient enough to see you refined by that fire. Because in life, you must realize that you have two types of fire. There are fires that you run from. These are the challenges of life that are there to consume you. They're there to poison you, steal your youth, and destroy your life. These fires require God to deliver you Himself. These fires require God to show His power and His might to save you before you are completely consumed. But there are fires you must walk through. Fires you might even be required to stay in. The 3 Hebrew boys said to the king, "We will not bow down to you even if you throw us into the fire. We trust our God to save us, but even if He doesn't, we will still not bow." Now, the Bible does not record that these boys disappeared from the fire or that the fire was quenched. On the contrary, it was hot and fiery enough to consume the gods who dropped them into the fire. Something remarkable happened. In that fire appeared a 4th man. He preserved them through that fire, but they stayed in that fire. It was not a fire that God wanted to quench. You must understand that there are certain situations in your life designed to help you grow. They might not be instigated by God, but God is going to use them to teach you patience. That's not all though. He's going to use these situations to see where your loyalty belongs. In the midst of the most pressing situations of life, would you still hold on to God? Would it be God above all problems, or would you look for an alternative at the expense of what you believe? God is all powerful. God is almighty. He preserves those boys through the fire, but He didn't quench the fire. The psalmist said, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I know that you are with me." Sometimes in life, you're going to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. God didn't promise us that it will be all blue skies and rainbows. What He promised us was we would never go through things that we cannot handle. What He promised was that even in our pain, He will bring out purpose. He promised that even in situations that have been designed for our destructions, He will cause them to work out for our good. So what it does is that in the fire, He begins to produce in you qualities you never thought you could have. It begins to build you more like Himself. You begin to conform to His image. In the fire, He begins to produce patience in you, an infinite ability to love, a capacity for kindness like never before, compassion, long-suffering, tolerance, generosity. The fire begins to expand your capacity till one day you realize that you can walk in the fire. What you find then is that instead of the fire consuming you, it begins to refine you. It's never a pleasant process, but the result is more pleasant than you can ever imagine. The fire is blazing hot, but so are you. The fire is fiery, but so are you. Your audacity begins to grow, your courage, your boldness, resilience, and strength. One day it will dawn on you that you have stopped praying for the fire to be quenched. You're thriving even while in it. Your relationship with God is soaring and you're living out your purpose. In that moment, when you have completely surrendered, then the fire ceases and boom, you emerge golden. You emerge strong, capable, bold, audacious, kind, compassionate, patient, and loyal with low limits to what you can achieve. That's what God is doing in you. That's what He's working in you. But the problem is many times we choose our problems over God. When it seems like He's not coming through and we don't have the patience to sit at His feet and listen, we just give up. We let it all go. But hey, God is looking for people who will say, God over my problems anytime, because they know that He's bigger. They know that He's stronger. They know of His power and His might, but they also know of His patience and love. So they say to themselves, if it doesn't quench the fire yet, then maybe there's something here for me. If it doesn't quench the fire yet, then maybe there's something He's teaching me. I'm going to surrender it all. I'm going to stay at His feet. I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. I'm going to emerge. That's what they say. That's what the men that God uses do. Because listen to me, that fire that we're in a hurry to get rid of is only one of the numerous fires you'll encounter in your life. Look around you. There are fires everywhere. The enemy is working overtime. There are storms everywhere. Giants rising everywhere. Betrayal, abuse, wars, famine, broken homes, suicides, traumatic experiences, pandemics, plagues, and natural disasters. There are fires everywhere. You must learn how to live through the fire. You must learn how to put God above all problems. You must learn to shift your gaze. Your world will overwhelm you if you let it. The storms of life will drown you if you let them. You must learn to live above the systems of the world. You must learn to live above your problems. You must learn to trust that even in your worst nightmares, God is working out everything for your good. He's working on your side, not against you. You can't be too fast. His plans for you are better than anything you can cook up for yourself. He gave man the ability to dream. If He wants to walk you through the fire, then you should let Him. If He wants to hold your hand through the fire, then you should be glad to be walking with the King of Glory. Best believe you're coming out of the fire as the best you could ever be. You're coming out of the fire as the strongest you can ever be. You're coming out of the fire as the boldest you can ever be. You're coming out of the fire outstretched beyond your limits, your most capable self. You're coming out as gold, but only if you'll sit and put God above all your problems. He's working it out for you. You only need to trust. Loyalty and trust are the finest qualities any man could have. Even God distinguished His finest men by their ability to hold on to Him in the toughest seasons of their lives. Your ability to hold on to God, especially in your hardest seasons, is proof of your loyalty and love for God. God described David as a man after His own heart. It was obvious that David loved God. His love for God wasn't in his perfection because David was far from a perfect man. His love for God was in his consistent devotion to choosing God over and over again. It didn't matter what he was going through, and David faced some really hard times in his life. He went through loss, grief, and betrayal. He escaped death so many times, yet it didn't matter the problems he was facing. As long as he could dwell in the presence of the Lord, he was okay. Some of his loneliest and darkest moments birthed some of his most memorable psalms. From his Psalms, we could read that he was going through hell. He was in anguish, yet he had an unshakable faith in God. He just always believed that God would come through. His biggest concern was that he could dwell in the house of the Lord forever and ever. He was loyal to God, his faith in God unwavering. He would trust God even when it looked like there was no hope for him. Over and over again, we saw David put God above his problems. And guess what? That's the real question for you today. Would you put God above your problems? Because God will come through. He always does.